Me and my brothers and I, got lost hiking a mountain. Now, by mountain, this is the New England term for mountain, so it's really not that big, but somehow we climbed it in 45 minutes, and we took about 4 or 5 hours to get down. This all happened on March 20th, 2012. I had decided that day to take my brothers hiking. It was a beautiful day. My mom was teaching piano, so I just thought I'm gonna be the fun older sister that takes my brothers hiking. So I got them all excited to go, got them all geared up. I think around that time, let's see, okay, it's 2017, Andreas is 16, Austin is 14, 15, Austin's 15, Andreas is 16, so 5 years ago, they were 11, 12 and 11. They were like between 10 and 12. So yeah, they were pretty young. I decided to take them hiking, and I hadn't really done too much hiking around that area, which probably should have been my first clue that this would go wrong. But I found a mountain, Mount Watatic in Ashburnham, Massachusetts, and you know, it had good reviews. It said it was pretty easy, pretty short, and that, you know, it was a nice hike to do with kids. So I was like, perfect. So I got in the car, we drove to Ashburnham. So we got out, we parked in like the little off-the-road parking spot by the woods, and we set off. And the trail on the way up was very nice. It was well cleared, you know, a clear trail. There were some markers, and like I said earlier, it took about 45 minutes to get to the top. Now I think this was just like one of the trails. I don't think we went to like the tippy top of the mountain, but you know, we went to like the top for that path, and it took 45 minutes. So the path that we had gone up was pretty easy, but it was a little bit of an inclination. Like, it was pretty steep, and my youngest brother was not the biggest fan because it was pretty hot. So when we got up there, we saw the way that we came down, and then we saw a nice and wide gravel pathway leading off the top down the mountain. So smart me should have said, let's go back down the way that we went up. Dumb me said, look, a wide open path. Let's take that because it's going to be easier. And that was where it all started to go horribly wrong. So we keep chomping down that hill, and I keep thinking to myself, this will be great. We'll get down there, and you know, it may take a little longer, but at least it's easier. And my brothers didn't seem to mind it because it was just a nice wide gravel path. So we reach the bottom of that gravel path, and there's nothing. There's no parking lot, there's no arrows, there's no people. We saw no people. When we got to the top, there was like a couple people milling around, but the whole way down the gravel pathway, we saw no people. Again, should have been another clue, but wasn't. So we get to the bottom of this gravel pathway, and there's nothing. There's no one. It's just a little teeny gravel, like kind of like a gravel parking lot, but there was no like roads in and out of it, so I don't really know what that was for. So we get to the bottom, and at this point I'm like, well, this has already taken a little while, and we're not at the bottom. So smart me at this time should have thought, you know, that's enough losting for the day. Let's go back up the gravel path and just go down the path we came. But I was not smart me. So what did I decide? I decide, hey look, there's another kind of trail looking thing. There were no markers or anything around, but it looked like a trail, and it was going down. And I was like, perfect. We're gonna go down, we're gonna get to the bottom. How wide can this be? We'll get to the bottom and like be near the parking lot. We decide to go down this trail because it is a definite trail. And at this point, my brothers are roasting. It's super hot. It's like the heat of the day is beating on us. So I think that's partially the reason why I didn't choose to walk back up the gravel walkway. because it was hotter out there, and at least this path was more shaded because it was in the woody areas. So we start going down this more woodsy pathway. As we are going down this little woodsy pathway, I see a teeny little stream. It's really more like a trickle. It wasn't like a stream. But the boys are roasting at this point, so I had this brilliant idea, inspired by my mom at Six Flags, to dunk their shirts in water. And so we dunked them in, wrung them out, and that did help their roastingness for sure. So that kind of cut some of the complaining out. I will say, I remember Andreas, my younger brother, as soon as he put on that shirt, he actually said the words, "Glory, hallelujah," because we were so hot. Cats, what are you gonna do? So after we find that stream and do the shirt dunking, we keep going down this hill, this little path. And what becomes of this little foot trail? It comes to a steep incline. So we're going down, down, down. And all of a sudden, we have another visitor here, popping right in front. Let me just scoot her away. So yes, this path goes into a steep incline, which is clearly not the way you want to go when you're trying to get down. At this point, we decide, what else are we going to do? We're just in the middle of dense woods on this little path. So yes, we decide to hike up this path. So this whole time, as we're kind of taking the very roundabout way down, I'm pretending that this is fine, that this is fun, you know, because I have my two younger brothers. They're obviously hot and not having fun, but I just keep saying, yes, this is awesome. It's so nice outside. Look at this scenery. Trying to keep it upbeat so they won't realize that I have no idea what I'm doing and like get freaked out or like crankier or whatever. So yeah, I'm just all like, chipper, isn't this fun? And they're like, yeah, it's so fun. We keep going up this steep hill. At this point, there were still no markers. There were no indications that we were going anywhere that we were trying to. So we actually stopped on the path at this point, and we all just actually prayed that we would just find our way out and get back to our car and be able to go home. And that was a pretty encouraging moment, just because like we all prayed together, and it was just like okay, we're gonna do this, like we can get there. I was getting really worried. I was feeling almost like, what are we gonna do? It was getting later. At this point, it was probably like 4:30, and we had left at like 1. So we got there and hiked up and all that. So yeah, about around this time, it's about 4, and we keep going, and all of a sudden I see a little yellow arrow, and this is the first sign of a sign that we had seen since going up. And so at this point I was like, yes, it's an arrow. And in my mind I was like, we're saved. And it looked like the arrow was pointing downhill. So we start trudging on this new little path downhill, and we're busting now because we're like, yes, this is the way. There's a sign. We're going to get there. So we're going. And then what happens? What happens once again? Yes, yes indeed. The trail starts to go up again. But since there was a yellow arrow, I figured this is a path. Maybe it goes up for a little bit and then down, and we'll still get to the bottom. So we kept trudging for a while, and eventually it just flattened out. It didn't go down, it didn't go up, but we kept going. And I'm hoping that it will get us to the car, or even to a road so we can get to the car. Finally, we come across another sign, one of those like wooden posts with the little this way, that way kind of things. It just had a couple different things pointing this way. And one of them said Route 119, and that's the road that we had driven on. So I was like, 119? I think we parked along 119, so that's probably the best route to go. So it said we were supposed to follow the blue arrows. We saw precisely one blue arrow, and then after that blue arrow, it was nothing. There was no path, no trail, no like sign. It was just like dense forest. So we go back up to the sign and start following the yellow arrows again, and it still does not feel right. So we stop and we listen at this point, because we're getting desperate. So we listen, and we think we hear cars kind of like on the right. So then I was like, you know what? Let's go back down the 119 path. Spoiler alert, this was a terrible plan. I was like, let's go back down the 119 where the blue arrows are supposed to be, because that's where the cars sound like they're coming from. There's no trail. Either someone snatched all the blue arrows and like the trees grew around it, or there was never any blue arrows. I don't know. There was no path though. At this point it was like 4:45. I just decided, let's keep going. Let's just go through here, head towards the cars. Maybe we'll see some blue arrows. So we get going. And at this point, Austin, my younger brother, was really starting to lag. We had been hiking for hours now. It was still hot and we were getting nowhere. So I don't blame him for that, but he started lagging. So I felt bad, obviously, because clearly it was my fault. We were in this predicament. So I'm trying to like make jokes, be funny, like, you know, basically anything to get people in a good mood so we can get out of these woods. Around every 5 minutes or so, I'd have us all stop and be really quiet so I could listen to see if I could hear the cars. And of course, Austin would keep busting away because he wanted to get there, and so you'd have to try to listen for cars over like tromp, 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 snap, crackle, twig, twig. And I was just like, Austin, stop it, I'm trying to listen. But it did seem that every time we tried to listen that the cars were just a little bit closer every time. So we're like, yes, we're going the right way. And these woods are dense. Like, there are logs, there is deer poo, there's just like forest, trees, branches whipping everywhere. It's dense. We're like going through these woods here. It was basically like the Hunger Games in there. But at this point I thought to myself, if we don't get out, if it gets to be dark, I'm gonna have to try to find a tromp around and call search and rescue or 911 or whatever you do when you get lost in the woods. You know, they don't really tell you what you do when you get lost in the woods. But yeah, so that was my plan if it got dark and we actually like could not get out. But I still had hope. So we keep walking along, and at one point we stop and we start to listen for cars. And I'm listening and I'm hearing no cars. And I'm just like, what? We've been following these cars for over an hour at this point. Now I hear nothing. What really freaked me out at this point was that I didn't really hear cars, but every so often there would be like a gust of wind. And if you really listened to the trees in the wind up high sounded a little bit like cars in the distance. So at this point I was like, no. Have I been following wind? I'm not a person who freaks out easily, but at that point I definitely started to get really worried. Like, have I been wasting this whole time? Are we not walking towards the road? Are we just following windy trees? I was starting to freak out inside, but again, I was really trying to hold it together for my brothers. I just like sucked it up, but there was definitely a twinge. At this point, it was like 5:15. It was still pretty light out because it was like March, but it was getting darker, and we were in the dense woods, so it was even darker than what it was. So we keep going because that's like the only thing we can do. And at this point, I'm like, all right, guys, we got to keep praying while we're going. So we started praying out loud. Every so often, we just like start praying, and my brothers would pray, and we'd just be like, dear Heavenly Father, please help us get out of these woods. Please help us stay safe. Please help us not get lost. You know, all of that. Just almost constantly while we're walking. Just every so often, we're just praying. At one point, Andreas started singing Onward Christian Soldiers, which I thought was pretty funny, but also like heartwarming moment, like, yes. Finally, we stop again and strain to listen. Straining, because last time was really a bust when we were trying to listen for cars. So we stop and we listen, and bam, we hear some cars. And this time they sound a little bit to the left. So we were like, yes! We start heading in that direction. And the direction that we were going, at this point where we're walking, it's not really like, there's a little bit of fluctuation, but it's mostly just like level or like flat. It's not really going up or down. So we're just like, where are we going? So we continue, and there's like this little hill. And so I'm like, maybe over this hill we'll be able to see a road in a distance. So we start really going. We're like, over this hill. Over this hill, there's gonna be a road. So we finally get over this hill. Well, we finally get to the top of the hill, and this whole time we've been saying, over this hill, we're gonna see a road. So we look over the hill, and there's no road. It pretty much looks like never-ending woods. But we still hear the cars, so we keep going. Austin's doing pretty good at this point. He's had a couple falls or like trips over things, but overall he's okay. And Andreas is just a regular child of Columbus. He's just a Tarzan, you know, bustin'. Finally, we come to this rock wall, and it's just like a low little rock wall. And the cars sound a lot closer. So I'm like, hey, if we follow this wall, we might actually find a road. So we go, and we're following this wall, and the cars still seem a little bit more to the left, but we just follow this wall. At this point now, I'm like, all right, no matter what, if we don't find anything in the next half an hour, then I'm going to do what I can to call someone, search and rescue, whatever. Because at this point it was around 6 o'clock, it was starting to get a little dark, so I did not want to just wait around until it was like the dark of the night to try to get any help. The cars are definitely sounding louder now at this point, so we're really feeling like we're gonna get there. And I was like, hey, we're almost there! And Smarty Andreas was like, yeah, you said that hours ago. And so finally, after about 15 minutes, we get out through this dense patch of forest, and what do we see? We see a road. And this road is like right there in plain view, and all that we have to do to get to it is cross this seemingly harmless land. So we start going. Turns out this harmless land is not actually land, but a swamp. So we start going, and the water is freezing and disgusting. And Andreas was just busting ahead because he was like, I'm going, bye. But I stayed with Austin. I went in front of Austin because I wanted to see like where he shouldn't step, because some of the areas were deeper than others. Like in some areas, it basically went up to my thigh of gross, murky, slimy swamp water. It was disgusting. Finally, after what felt like forever, because that was actually a pretty wide expanse of land, we finally get to the other side. There's no path or anything out of this swamp. We have to like climb up this little embankment and over one of those like guardrails on the road. So as we're climbing over, this happy little family bikes by, and they're just like, you know, going on a family bike ride, and we climb out of the swamp looking busted. We're dirty, we're sweaty, like mud, just like too overjoyed to see a road. So this family stops, and the dad is like, did you just come out of the swamp? And I'm like, yep, we got lost in the woods. And he was like, where did you park? And I told him, you know, 119. And he was like, oh, this is 119. I think the parking lot is like a quarter mile down. So we booked it. We booked it. We were running down that street, and Austin was really skinny at the time, and his pants were soaking wet because we swamped. And yeah, his pants kept falling down the whole way. And finally, we get to the parking lot. We were just so happy to see this car. Oh my goodness, I cannot even put into words what we felt upon reaching the parking lot and not having to trudge anymore. We were so happy. As a side note, at one point while we were walking around, one of the things that I talked about to distract them was donuts. I would just keep saying, when we get out of here, I'm going to buy you guys donuts. What kind of donuts do you want? Oh, you know, I think I want a Boston cream. You should get one of those strawberry frosteds. And yeah, we could smash it together with like one of those powdered gel. I don't know. We were just talking about donuts. And I told them I would get donuts. So we get to the car, and I went and we got donuts. And we finally got home, and it was dark. And my mom was, I think she was finishing up teaching. And she didn't really know at this point that we had gotten lost in the woods. So I come in, and she was like, oh, how was your hike? And I was like, oh, you know, we just got lost in the woods for like 5 hours. And she was like, what? Really? And I was like, really? We had been hiking from like 1:30 until like 6:45. So we were lost for a good 5 hours on the little Mount Watatic. Thanks for watching, and if you stayed all the way through, thanks for watching, because I'm sure this is going to be a pretty long video. But anyways, bye.